Dr. Florence Rabier, Director General, ECMWF. What does that do?
ECMWF stands for European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, which is weather forecasts from typically 2 to 15 days ahead.
And why is it important that we know what's going to happen to the weather? Obviously, when we go on holiday, we'd like to have a good estimate, but how important is it?
But also, predicting the weather allows to predict where severe events are going to happen, so it allows to actually raise awareness before there's a storm or predict the floods, etc. So actually it helps protect life and property, and that's very important. So we provide our data to the national meteorological services who work with civil protection agencies around Europe to actually do some emergency services in case anything bad happens. But also it allows planning, and it's used by all sorts of businesses and transportation, agriculture, everything. So it has a much broader impact than just us to take an umbrella or a swimsuit when we're on holiday.
You mentioned maybe 15 days. How far ahead can you look at this stage, and how do you compare with other organisations that forecast the weather?
So at the time when we were created 40 years ago, we could only predict the weather up to 2 days ahead, and we've really pushed the limits. So the goal was to predict up to 10 days ahead. But actually now, due to new technology, computers, but also satellite data, we can compute every day up to 15 days ahead with quite a good accuracy. We also predict sometimes up to a month ahead or even several months ahead. And then we can predict big features in the atmosphere like El Nino. I'm sure you've heard about El Nino. And these have huge consequences across the world. So I think we can be proud in Europe that we have the best European model in the world. So our forecasts are actually measured by the World Meterological Organization, are routinely always the best compared to the US, Japan or anything. And actually we help even some other countries, even the US, we can help them because we also give them our data, our forecasts. And in particular, we were particularly useful when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, and we were the very first to predict that it would actually come back and hit the US after having hit the Caribbean. And the US forecasters actually looked at our forecasts and saw that they were different from the others, but they actually trusted us, and this means they could have advance warning of what was going to happen, and they could influence authorities to actually do something to prevent even more people dying and suffering from the consequences of the hurricane.
And Copernicus, does that aid you in your work? How important is it to what you do?
Well, actually, Copernicus, we've been entrusted by the European Union with 2 services of Copernicus, the Climate Change Service and the Atmosphere Monitoring Service. So we use the tools we used to have for weather prediction to now monitor the climate, but also predict aerosols and greenhouse gases, which is very important when you think of the COP21 and the Paris Treaty, and monitoring the climate and trying to control the emissions and what's going to happen to us in the future.
And will you be able to see which countries are abiding by their commitments in COP21?
Well, hopefully if we have enough satellite observations, and there are some plans to have new satellites observing CO2, then we can disentangle what is natural CO2 and what is emissions, and then we can track it, and then we could go back to where the countries are emitting CO2. So that's the ultimate goal indeed.